Hi guys, today is Wellness Wednesday. We're partially back from our vacation. I still have to go to Hungary, but did you have a great time in Greece?
I had a great time in Greece, in Italy, and London.
Italy.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yep,
goodness, you went
it
all
was
over the
great.
place.
Yep.
That's awesome. So anyway, because you walked so much,
Yes.
you knew that you need to make sure you have a perfect footwear, right?
Yep. So good footwear is very important to maintain good health. Your feet actually take the weight of the body through the whole day. So if it's 100 steps versus 10,000 steps, you've got to make sure you've got good support for your feet. We're going to talk a little bit about the different foot patterns that we see more commonly and how we can help over general basis to kind of alleviate some of those aches and pains.
So the two things are basically either most of the times pronators or supinators,
Correct,
right?
correct.
And that creates all sorts of other issues as well, right?
So if you're looking at the basic foot patterns without going up the body to the ankles, knees, and hips, low back, when you're looking at the basic foot pattern, you have a supinator, which is where their feet are basically turned inward on a regular basis. We see that a lot in sports such as soccer,
Absolutely.
and hockey, you had mentioned,
Absolutely.
because of the way that they're trained to be able to kick the ball and maintain their position in fast movement. And then there's pronators, which are basically turning your feet inward. You see a lot of pronators in patients who have, clients or patients have knock knees. They'll tend to then have their feet that are actually turned a little bit on the outside. So those are the more common foot patterns that we see. Oftentimes, we always tell patients, and I'm sure you tell clients, at the minimum when we're looking at sports shoes and footwear, especially if you're using them on a regular basis, you have to minimally change them out every 6 months, if not more often.
Absolutely. It's interesting because, and you can see this just like Doc said, you can see these type of problems not just on an average person, but you can see it on athletes as well. Even myself, several years ago, worked with dancers as well. They are on their feet all the time.
Yes.
You would not believe it how badly they can be. Actually, their foot pattern can cause all sorts of lower back problems, knee problems. I worked with one actually who I needed to suggest some insoles into his foot, into his shoes, because unfortunately he was not supinating like myself, but he was pronating so much. So it basically, and that's the difference, what we want to make sure that the viewers understand. How do you know when you're a supinator or pronator? Well,
Right.
So why don't you explain it to them?
So we were just looking this up. And so one way that you can tell more commonly, if you have a pair of shoes that you know that you have been using for a longer period of time, not a brand new pair,
Right.
You can look at the tread at the bottom. Normal wear and tear for most patients, because they have more pronation that occurs. You'll see the tread occurring not just on the outside, but a little bit on the inside as well. So it's kind of an even tread pattern that you leave in there, but you see more on the inside because pronation tends to be turning your foot outward. So there where your tread pattern on the medial aspect or the middle part of your shoes then will be a little bit worn out. When you have a supinator, you end up having a little bit more tread wear on the outside of the shoe.
That's me.
Because you end up having to, you turn your foot a little bit more and you can see that on the outside tread pattern.
Yes.
The whole idea of tread is to be able to give you a little bit of grip at the bottom of a surface, and oftentimes it doesn't happen on gravel or hard floors, but when you run in mud or dirt or sand and stuff like that, you get a little bit more grip. We oftentimes say, oh wow, it's a little bit harder, or it's a more struggle with the knees if you have a harder surface, but then when you have just a tiny bit of give, it tends to give you a little bit of go, with the knees and the hips as well. So we have suggested, especially around here with clients, when they're not sure, go ahead and put your foot wet, your regular foot wet, put it in the sand or the mud, or even in a plain paper bag. You can kind of see your pattern. You should see half the foot. When
Exactly.
you put your foot down, normal tread pattern is seeing the half foot. If you have less than that, more likely you're supinated. Pronated is a little harder to tell in that case because there is a natural arch, and if you're seeing almost your full foot, more than likely you're a pronator. So.
Yes, and then you definitely have to address that because, so this is where the exercise comes into places as well, Fortunately, you can definitely correct these issues. So, most of the times, either the calves are too loose or they are too tight.
Yeah.
So when you pronate pronating, your calves are not supporting you as much. That's a very common problem. When you're supinating, your calves can be too tight. Also, your tibia, anterior tibialis, can be too tight as well. So all of these things need to be worked on and addressed. And there are several different things what you can do for that. If your calves are too tight, you can also create plantar fasciitis. Very interesting. So people think that, oh, just because I landed on my heel, that's the only way you can get plantar fasciitis. Actually, most of the times it's not even a common problem. People never land on their heels. Unfortunately, their calves are way too tight, and that creates an inflammation in the sole.
Correct. So the plantar fascia is basically a fascial layer between the forefoot and the hind foot, and it is, especially in patients who have a higher arch, when the plantar fascia gets really tight, you're having that stretching on the plantar fascia, or that tautness that's not getting appropriate support, so it doesn't have a give to it, and it's tighter, and therefore it's more painful. We know that when patients have that first step, when they get down in the morning from their bed, there's ouch. They take a couple steps, it gets tiny bit better, or maybe it continues if it's really bad. Footwear can tell you too, because tends to have a lot less, or they say sometimes patients tend to have a fallen arch when that is, because arch support is super important. So making sure you stretch appropriately, using ice on the foot, making sure you have appropriate footwear that has good arch support. We did a foot series here just like about a year ago, and I had a friend from high school who pointed it out to me, that she had been told that there were some foot problems that she had. She tried to listen to, the specialist about getting appropriate footwear and putting in support, and it actually made her feel worse. And I appreciate those comments, because, it gives us time to learn about what it is. So I say, I'm giving you information as, watching this video and so forth. But if what we're giving you doesn't work, please go back to your podiatrist or your family practice doctor, your trainer, physical therapist. There's lots of chiropractor. There's a lot of people out there who are well versed in trying to figure out what's going on, because you may be unique. There may be something else going on, and it's not what it seems to be. So we have the plantar fascia that's tight. It could be something pulling from up the heel on, just as you mentioned. It could be the back part of the thigh. Not the thigh, the calves, yeah, so pulling up, because there's lots of muscle groups in there. Yep, the soleus gastrocnemius, there's could be back in the Achilles tendon pulling up, what's going on in there too, all the way up into the knee, because we know knee problems then cause foot problems. So the first part, we were talking about the foot issues, and we can continue at another time talking about the knees and the hips and the back, but just in general, they really cause issues to the feet, and sometimes when you address those as well, the feet do get better.
Absolutely. Yeah, so always just like look at your body as a whole, not just one particular piece.
Yeah.
And that way you're going to get the answer. But as Doc said, that if one solution doesn't work, what you addressed and you tried, then you definitely have to talk to a specialist and figure it out, because probably there are some misalignments. And for example, during our functional movement screening, because Danielle and myself are specialists in that department as well, we do a functional movement screening test. And that definitely immediately going to shows us if somebody have any alignment issues, any mobility issues, and that way you're going to have a suboptimal movement pattern, which will create all sorts of aches and pains sooner or later, and can create injuries as well. So these are definitely have to be addressed at the beginning. So that's why you have to find the right coach of yours, the proper doctor of yours. Guys, listen to us, watch us, exercise medicine, guys.
Nutrition is the key.